Okay, now we're excellent.
There you go.
Oh, welcome everybody. Mason and I are going to be weaving you some tales of build. So Satya said that Microsoft's mission statement is to empower every person, every organization on the planet to achieve more, and that the cloud is a model, not a place, which supports their hybrid approach and their commitment to the enterprise space, as well as 85% of the Fortune 500 use quote-unquote Microsoft Cloud, which goes a little bit beyond Azure, but still, that's a pretty striking number. And against our competitors, they're the only public provider in China. But the big thing with that mission statement there is the openness, and this is just a handful of some of the initiatives that they took on or announced at Build this year. And you may notice some of these being pretty interesting regarding the pivotal commitment with running Ubuntu on Windows, Cloud Foundry is a PaaS platform on Azure, Red Hat is a partner of Microsoft now.
Red Hat and Microsoft share support ticket systems, so that's how integrated they are. When there's a support problem with Red Hat on Azure, they both take tickets off that system. That's the level of integration.
And there are a ton of initiatives, such as the open source partnerships, such as like 60% of the marketplace apps are Linux products or run on Linux. I mean, they are absolutely fine with you not running Windows in Azure. They just care if you're running it on Azure. They purchased Xamarin for $400 million and immediately made it open source and free and available to everybody. 5 years ago, I bet Microsoft wouldn't have done that at all. 10 years ago, absolutely not. Oh, the Xbox Dev Kit, it used to be like a $30,000 hardware box that you had to purchase. You can, it's like 2 clicks now, and you can develop applications that run on Xbox and can get into the store. Some of the more interesting things, though, were about this push towards abstractions and cognitive services. So Satya, I think, said, and I quote, "Human language is the new user interface." And with some of these new smart services, every developer will build language intelligent apps. That means you can leverage things like text analytics, speech, facial recognition. They have an API where you can submit a photograph and it will give you a human language caption of what's in the photograph.
Or tell you which celebrity you look like.
Or tell you which celebrity you look like.
Or how old it thinks you are.
How old you think you are, what dog you look like. But the caption thing is pretty interesting for, accessibility and folks with visual impairments or the blind and so on. So it's pretty impressive stuff. As well as bots and assistants. They announced Skype. There's a bot framework where you can implement bots into Skype and basically leverage these cognitive services to hit up APIs and to kind of like similar to some of the Slack integrations we have, or Slackbot, where you can type a message and it will interpret that as a command and then hit an API or a service. The stemming from that and that is included in a abstraction theme. So it seems like these bots, as we kind of talked about, Service Fabric, Azure Functions, these are sort of pushing this approach of, or this concept of, there's no real IaaS, you have to deal with all the infrastructure, right? You have to maintain the infrastructure. PaaS, it's an abstraction on top of the infrastructure. You don't really have to worry about it. if you start leveraging some of the services and SaaS offerings, you don't even have to manage the PaaS part. You get the scalability and reliability of other services, things like that. Other functions are basically, you don't even care what's running. Like, you don't even have to define the application suite. You just put a block of code into this thing, and it's run and you pay per execution, and you pay per the resources used, memory and CPU. Service Fabric is a very interesting level of abstraction that kind of orchestrates how an application runs on top of virtual infrastructure. It's like PaaS in that you don't have to manage it, and you just kind of figure out what you want to run on that cluster, and it's smart enough to figure out how to handle the resiliency and putting it across the partitions in the cluster. Specifically on the application development front, the biggest news was .NET Core, which is an entirely open source version of .NET, and it's designed to be modular and lightweight, runs in Docker containers, runs on Linux. You can write it today on OS X, on Linux, in Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, any text editor you want, on any platform that you want, on any operating system you want, whatever. And it's kind of like the new Java, but it's not running on a runtime in a JVM. So to quote Scott Hanselman here, he basically says, after a pretty impressive demo of a .NET Core app running in a container on Azure, AWS, Docker Cloud, it's another like cloud agnostic approach. I mean, if you can run .NET Core, I would highly recommend considering a solution that's backed by it.
It's 10 times faster, as noted here, than traditional MVC, but it's also 6 times faster than Node. And the way they benchmark that, you can say, yeah, that's just garbage, it's statistics, but they used a third-party tool that's kind of the industry standard to benchmark these things.
Yeah.
And so the fact that they're running 6 times faster than Node, to me, is because Node is about it.
Everybody thinks Node is the fastest, and it's not at all. But from a business perspective, converting Win32 apps to AppX. So AppX is the new universal application installer that's declarative and pretty awesome. And the Win32 apps are kind of the older MSI traditional Windows installer type stuff. With the anniversary release of Windows 10, you'll be able to convert those old Win32 applications to Windows 10 installer apps, basically. And they demoed like Age of Empires 2, which is like
that was a pretty cool demo.
It was a pretty cool demo, and then which is a smaller file, a couple hundred meg maybe, but then they demoed The Witcher 3, which is like
it's a couple gigs. It's like 10 gigs.
10, 20 gigs or something like that. So, I mean, it seems to be pretty powerful, and we could definitely see some companies with like these old legacy desktop applications, and they want to move them to the cloud, or they want to move them somewhere else, and maybe running them on 2016 with a WSA installer from this conversion may be a simple win for them. Let's see, we mentioned the Xamarin thing. To quote Donovan Brown, like, we're changing the rules for DevOps in that you can. He had some ridiculous demo where he was on OS X running building a Xamarin application that was testing via the test kit 36 devices across iOS, Android, and Windows, and you saw like errors on specific builds of specific devices. It was pretty impressive. It was pretty powerful. I've been a kind of a critic of Xamarin for quite some time, but it actually looks like it's there. I think it's not getting there. It is there. So if you were going to do native mobile development, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be using Xamarin today. Logic App Connectors are coming soon. You can already do Azure Functions in like ASA jobs, Azure Stream Analytics jobs. It's in preview. You can also do remote debugging, so you can it's an open source thing with their whole roadmap is on GitHub. You can even influence it too if you want. You can also deploy Azure Functions with ARM APIs. IoT, I was surprised they didn't have as big of a presence on IoT than I was expecting compared to like last year and some of the marketing in the past year.
It was surprisingly few offerings on that for us to learn about.
Yeah, Power BI Desktop, IoT Hub, IoT Suite still, and again, but otherwise like they're like, yeah, that's going great. Keep using our stuff. So a couple things to call out with service traffic and microservices. Granted, this was April 1st, 2nd, like right around that time frame. Virtual machine scale sets are generally available. Azure Container Service was public preview at this time and has since gone to GA with the Mesosphere DCOS release. That also going to GA, or version 1, I guess. What's really cool and possibly new about this is you can run Service Fabric on Linux and any other cloud provider or on-premise. I think that some of that stuff is a little bit experimental, but it supports .NET Core and is very fast and lightweight, and I wouldn't say it's maybe ready for prime time just yet. It's not as GA as obviously the cloud-based Service Fabric, but I think it's going to get there pretty soon. It's pretty impressive. Also, container support is coming to Service Fabric, which is pretty interesting. DocumentDB they had nothing but ridiculous things to say about it. You can support the MongoDB wired protocol now for the first time, I think, which you couldn't do before. Designed for throughput so they changed the pricing with this year's build. So before, people were kind of pissed where like if I wanted to store more data, I had to pay for like the throughput as well. So now you can pay for two different, depending on the throughput needs that you have and depending on the storage needs, the pricing is completely different. Like we looked at it on Astute, and the pricing is actually much more reasonable than we were expecting. Than Brian and I knew about just a few months ago. So like we had sort of written it off, but with the new pricing model, it was actually very reasonable, which is pretty great. I know a lot of people were complaining about that. You get global replication now out of the box. They are touting that you can store unlimited amounts of data through these new partitions and partition collections, which is pretty sweet. And it's supposedly kind of tricky to set up properly because it very much relies on how you partition on a key. And if you do it poorly, like a SQL index or something like that, like it's not going to give you any benefit and it's going to cost you a ton of money and you're going to have terrible throughput. But there are a couple huge applications today, like Halo 5 has a feature that is entirely backed with DocumentDB, and 99 percentile of the queries pull data out with less than 2 millisecond latency, which is ridiculous. I don't even know how that's really possible if you think about it with a global application like Halo 5. Walking Dead No Man's Land is a browser-based app, 99 percentile, 10 millisecond latency, which is pretty crazy.
Still ridiculous.
And they support 1 billion requests a day, which
is ridiculous.
If you want to do scalability, like, and that was mainly this talk, it looks like DocumentDB may be an ideal place to start looking. And the support is there. A lot of applications are using it, I think, in Azure today. But it seems to be pretty powerful. SQL Elastic Jobs was kind of a one-off thing. Nate, what were those? That was kind of
The main point is if you have distributed databases and you need to run various administrative tasks against it, you can use these SQL Elastic jobs, and it'll run a given script. Say you're making schema changes, or you're running some monitoring thing, or some long-running job, as for example, reindexing the database. You can do it doing SQL Elastic jobs, and it's kind of smart enough to do it across all the databases and do it when the time is right and all that kind of stuff. So it's just kind of a nice database management tool.
Azure Storage had a ton of announcements. Premium disks are out of preview. They're GA. Azure Files is in GA. Client libraries for Xamarin, iOS, and Python are coming soon, so you'll be able to go directly from an iOS app to Azure Storage, or from a Python script or whatever. Python app, even a Django, maybe a Django thing. Encryption at rest is available in preview at this time in early April in Southeast Asia only, but they said it'll be worldwide within 6 weeks. So next week, I think, is 6 weeks. So anytime now, you can encrypt data in Azure Storage at rest, doing nothing, which is pretty sweet. Cold storage. Storage accounts now support cold storage in addition to hot storage. The price is about a 60% savings, roughly a third the cost of hot storage or Azure Storage today, which is pretty cheap. Like it's a penny a gig, which is, yeah. And it gets cheaper from there the more you use, I think. If you use like over a terabyte, it gets a little bit cheaper even. So not a ton. We're talking like fractions of a penny at that point. But you can also do full text search on blobs in Azure Storage. So PDFs, XML files, docs, Office files. That's in public preview now. They're evaluating table storage. But for now, they're basically taking feedback on it. If it turns out to be something that a lot of customers want, they may look at implementing it for table storage, but right now it's blob only, which is pretty impressive. You'd have to, thinking about this today, without this, you'd have to sort of extract that data out and process it and index it so you'd have to maybe do, I don't know, you'd have to, parse a PDF for text and then dump that to something else and index it. I mean, a lot of work, and you kind of can do full text searching out of the box now, which is pretty crazy. Coming back to some of the productivity, some of the human language as an interface piece, the head of Office 365 basically said intelligence is the new energy for innovation. Office 365 has a bunch of developer kits now and SDKs, and they're like Microsoft Graph is where they're kind of pushing everything for O365 stuff. They brought like one of the VPs of Starbucks on stage, how you can order from Outlook directly a Starbucks order, which is, it's kind of neat. Is it really that groundbreaking? Probably not. But if you have, line of business applications that, your people in the field are using Outlook, and or remote employees are using Outlook, and you have a tool that's homegrown, then maybe that is a cool thing that you may want to integrate. Containers are all the rage right now. So Azure's or Microsoft's container as a service platform is currently GA, supports for Docker Swarm as well as Mesosphere DCOS. Mesosphere is one of our partners, if you didn't know. Kind of where we are pushing a lot of the folks we're talking to about this. Docker Swarm seems to be great for developers, but there's a fair amount of criticism about it from a operation perspective, and Azure's support of it seems to be kind of wonky. It's probably wonky for DCOS too, but probably better for DCOS because Mesosphere seems to be more involved there. I don't really know how involved Docker is on the Docker Swarm integration. It's coming soon with the ACS or Azure Container Service, multiple IPs on a NIC, which is kind of neat. I don't think you can do this today. And it'll allow for it'll allow for easier management of endpoints on a container. So containers can talk to each other via different NICs, and you don't have to worry about like doing like port forwarding and nonsense in a container.
Give multiple NICs on a VM?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that you can do today,
Yeah, you can do that.
but it's sort of a pain to manage. And there's like a limit, I think, in a VNet of how many NICs that you can put in a VNet, I think. So it's kind of getting better. It's getting better. There's a Docker network driver. Do you know much about that, Ryan? Okay, yeah, I'm not entirely sure either, but I would imagine you can get nicer container to network talking communication with that Docker network driver. But that stuff's all coming. No dates or anything on that, so don't hold your breath. Azure Stack, they pushed it a lot, but there isn't really much to talk about. No one really said anything new about it. They really are thinking it's the way to do hybrid. Jeffrey Snover even said like Stack is the way to kind of cover your ass, I think, if you're not ready to go to the cloud. It's like you can use the cloud model, and when you're ready, you can migrate from Stack to public cloud. But the main drawback, I think, right now, and it's coming soon, is the ability to install it on more than one machine. So like right now, you install it on a crazy server box with like 96 gigs of RAM and whatever else. Entity Framework.
Yeah.
Entity Framework Core. This is more of an application level thing. It's completely new from the ground up. It's separate from Entity Framework 6. A ton of improvements from a performance perspective. SQL generation is better. There's no support right now for stored procedures or link queries, which makes it a no use in my opinion. But the performance is significantly better, and that was one of the biggest reasons for not using Entity Framework, was that 6 and Core are different. They're going to be separate paths and products, and they'll be released. Updates for them will be released in parallel. VM scale sets, as mentioned earlier, that's in GA. So Container Service, Service Fabric, Azure Batch. There's a bunch of other services that already leverage VM scale sets today. What's cool about them is you get fault and service domain stuff out of the box, load balancer integration out of the box. It does over provisioning and will decommission the machines that are above the amount that was needed. So if you needed 100, it may provision like 120 and then get rid of the 20 extra for speed of scaling up and down, that kind of thing. It doesn't go the other way. It doesn't like delete less and then bring them back up. That would be ridiculous. There was a very interesting story about configuration management and doing updates. There's a patch extension that you can do updates on VMs within a scale set. So if you have, an interesting there is if you have a VM today and it's running whatever build of Windows, and then you scale up to like 6 more VMs, it's going to look at the newest version, and you need to be aware of, maybe some of the patching and security stuff isn't the same, so the patch extension will kind of make sure that that's all jelly and all cool, and those things will gel together. Custom images support, it's pretty sweet. Cloud Foundry is another pivotal partnership. This is that PaaS platform that runs on Azure and Google and AWS and on-prem and whatever else. Windows Server 2016 could not get here soon enough.
Just wait for technical preview 7.
Across the board, like, this is all from Snover's interview, 1/10 the number of critical patches, fewer reboots, less I/O operations on a boot, less vulnerabilities from a security perspective. Starts up 26 times faster. A nano server will boot up in 2.5 seconds, which is equivalent to a Linux distro. And it's 26 times smaller. So a nano server will be 440 meg deployed. This is the first born in the cloud server operating system, or cloud designed server operating system from Microsoft, and so far it looks ridiculous.
Yeah.
Then what makes it kind of also, it's going to be easier to manage with Chef with these WSA package files. Again, these things are declarative, so like you can install and do servicing and stuff online, offline, doesn't matter. It's more like the Linux world where like it'll get the state to where it is declared to be, and it feels like to me there's less of that like registry installation MSI type crap, like installer type crap, which is a nightmare for configuration management, as we all know, on Windows, and is a nightmare for Chef and recipes in particular, and cookbooks and stuff. So it's built for .NET Core, because .NET Core is a lot less lightweight, or it's a lot more lightweight than .NET, the full .NET framework. And it's kind of
So
Snowbird is really pushing this, whatever you
So
want.
smaller, it's so that you can fit your whole cloud into one computer. They're
See,
totally aligned.
that's
The
the
Azure
goal.
Stack and Nano and Core story totally aligned.
Yeah. Who needs more than one computer for your cloud,
Yeah,
right?
that's
What was the other thing I was going to say? That's pretty much all we had, guys. If there's any questions or concerns.
Yeah, it was a lot. I mean, obviously, it was 3 days of stuff, so it was hard to put into a concise. I mean, we probably could have done four lunch and learns and kind of got more into detail, but this is an overview. We were hoping to give you guys, introduce you to something maybe you hadn't heard, so you can go
Yeah.
research it yourself or
And
ask us.
spur some interest and excitement around some of these things.
Yeah, it's a new Microsoft for sure. That's
No
the
question.
number one takeaway. It's a different company,
Yeah.
completely different company.
The fact that they're open to a new PaaS platform, like if you don't want to use Azure PaaS, you can run a different PaaS platform on Azure today. Like they don't care.